You're listening to Rewilding Humanity, the podcast for those who've walked through the fire and came back with medicine. I'm Krysta, artist, plant alchemist, and a woman initiated by illness, grief, and spirit. Here, we rise from collapse, reclaim our wild, and remember who the hell we are. Let's get into it. Somewhere between the walls of the psych ward and the wild plants outside, I started remembering who I was. This is the moment I began crawling out of the darkness. Welcome to episode 2 of the Resurrection Trilogy. Yeah, it was interesting. I woke up this morning and felt horrible. I wasn't sure what was going to happen as I started unpacking this story. And I've been working with therapists and of all sorts over the past year and a half. And I know that telling the story is a huge part of what's going to heal me. There's so much purpose in it, but there's also an unraveling that's going to happen through the nervous system. So I definitely felt that this morning, but I felt so great when I finished the first episode yesterday, and I know I'm going to feel great once this one is done as well. Yeah, it's so interesting how the nervous system works and how trauma is stored in the body. I got a real masterclass of the nervous system. Never asked for this, never wanted this, but here we are. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've learned a lot, and it's definitely going to be a big topic of conversation in future episodes. Yeah. Just going to take a sip of my rose water latte. It's so fucking good, you guys. If you haven't added rose water to your lattes yet, my God, just start. It's so amazing. Rose is like one of my favorite plant allies, and it's interesting because it's such a heart medicine, and it's definitely been one of the things that I've leaned on my healing journey and my never-ending healing journey. Like, I feel like before this season of the podcast, it was always about my healing journey and what the fuck, and like, how could it get any worse? And it did. It got so much worse. Yeah, we've had past episodes where we've discussed like human design and gene keys, profiles, and all of that. And I do have a very difficult chart, and this just may be a theme in my life where I have to go through tough things and teach other people about it. It doesn't make it suck any less, though. I have to say, I wish it were different. Let's put it that way some days. Okay, let's dive back in to where we left off. I'm trying to remember. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I dropped a bit of a bomb at the end of the last episode and the beginning of this one around going to the psych ward. And yeah, that was something. Wow. We'll get into that a little bit further in the episode. There were a few things that happened prior to getting there. I tried so many different things to heal. There was like all of the resting that I was doing because there wasn't really much else that I could do. But I started going down the rabbit hole of medication, which, oh my God, what a nightmare. I have some stories around that. Leaning into some of these communities that I had discovered around nervous system healing. So there were a couple. There was one, it was called like Panic. What is it? Panic No More or something. I don't know. Anyway, there was that one. There was another one called Primal Trust, which was actually great. And it had a lot of tools around healing the nervous system and the vagus nerve through things like toning. So like Voo, right? So remember in the first episode, I had mentioned that my voice had become really weak. I feel like on some level, somehow my vagus nerve had been damaged somehow. I don't even know how that happens. Your vagus nerve goes from your brainstem and throughout your body and is kind of like it monitors and makes so many different parts of your body function. And it's connected to the throat, it's connected to the heart, right? Like people who get diagnosed with POTS, for example, which is, I thought I had it. I probably did if I were to be diagnosed. Like they probably would have been like, yeah, you have this. But basically, like you have issues standing up, your heart rate is all funky, energy's all whack. Like I can't remember the exact details of it, but it's actually the nervous system. And the reason they don't have a cure for it is because anything that has to do with the nervous system, like there's not really much you can do about it. And there are tools and ways to come back from these diseases, I guess you could call. But really, it's just an extreme form of nervous system dysregulation. Same with the stomach stuff, right? Like I had such bad stomach pains. Your vagus nerve's connected to the stomach and guts. So yeah, and then I did have this other thing too, I forgot to mention. So when I was first hit with this, I noticed when I tried to be still and close my eyes, I could feel and like sense and almost see my energy being pulled from side to side. And in my research, I discovered that that is a symptom of some type of vagus nerve issue or injury. So, yeah, again, the plot thickens and another layer. Very, very debilitating. I remember just feeling like quite dizzy with my eyes closed. There was always just the spinning sensation that took quite some time to go. And I also haven't mentioned this, but I'm not 100%. I still have quite a few symptoms, not as bad as it was, obviously, because I am much more functional than I was, but it's still tough. It's still really tough. Every day is still, I don't want to say a fight or a struggle. Some days there's ease, but yeah, it does get better. A lot of what I have been dealing with has just been the trauma of what happened and being so sick and having to go to the psych ward and all of these things. And this has just been playing in my mind over and over again, and something in me this entire time. And I don't know why. It feels like a calling, but it's just been like, you have to tell this story, you have to tell this story, you have to tell this story. And so I feel like telling the story is medicine because I'm going to be able to get it out of my head and just get it out of my body in a sense. Because the looping of, oh, I can't forget this thing, or like all of these memories of this traumatic thing that happened keep coming up as like a, oh, don't forget about this to talk about, don't forget about this. And so I've made notes, which I'm like reviewing as I am telling these stories. But I'm so excited to get it out. Just get it out. Yeah. Okay. So I want to jump in at a point just before the psych ward. This is probably, yeah, this is like January, February, March-ish. So now we're into like November, December, January. We're 4, 5, 6 months into this thing. And like I mentioned, I've joined these groups. I'm trying all these techniques for healing, and suggestions are Oh, you have agoraphobia? Go outside. Oh, you're having constant panic attacks. And again, like none of this felt like panic attacks. Like I've had panic attacks. This was something completely different. Challenge it. Your heart is beating out of control and you're freaking out about getting exercise. Climb a mountain and make it beat harder. So it's like challenging the nervous system and like showing the body that, like, no, you're not actually dying. And holy shit, is that ever difficult to do? My God, I remember going into a grocery store, like, it was just so overwhelming because everything was overwhelming because my senses were just like blown up, right? So I'd be walking down an aisle with my mom because I couldn't go in by myself. And I hear the cart dragging behind me and it's like driving me insane. And I hear the smallest little things, people talking, the humming in the background, the lights being too bright, smells, like everything was just so intense. And I would push myself to go into those situations and just survive it. And I don't know, like, I get that that's a technique that works for some people. It was not really helping me. I also tried these other techniques from the Primal Trust program, and it was like eye movements, which is linked, I think, to EMDR work, which I haven't done yet, and I plan to, but the amazing people that I'm working with now who have been supporting me on my journey have suggested that I want to be in a pretty stable state before approaching something like that. And so this was like a more gentle version of that, but there was like eye movements, toning, different yoga techniques and things. And yeah, it was just and the advice is always just like to stay calm and to go into it, to go into the fear. And I listened to so many somatic meditations and things. But the reality was that like my life had become so small. Like okay, it was wake up in a jolt at 4 in the morning to the same room that I had been trapped in for months and get up and just start a whole day of horror over again and try to punctuate it by doing like these little practices and things and to try to be calm. And me, the control freak, is I gotta fix this, right? So I'm researching. And I'm like, the last thing I want to do is get on medication or anything, right? But I'm like, I gotta try something. So that became the next desperate attempt. I went to my GP, who like I never see, and he prescribed me a couple of things. One of them was a sleeping pill. Oh God. This is probably one of the most traumatic things that happened to me during this period. Oh, it was so scary. This was the last thing that I needed to have happen. But basically, I took a pill to sleep and it sucked me into a sleep paralysis. And when I say sucked, it's like the sensation was so horrifying. So I'm already just in this hyper terrible state. And I remember this feeling. It's like I laid down and then it was just like I got sucked into myself and I was falling. And I could see it was like I was dreaming, but I wasn't. And I could see all of these hands trying to grab at me as I'm falling down this hole. I don't know if you've ever seen, what is that movie? The Labyrinth? I'm dating myself here. If you're an 80s kid, then you probably have seen it. But like when the chick falls down that hole and there's all the hands that like make shapes like faces and they're like grabbing at her. Anyway, that's what it was like. And then I half knew what was going on. I was just like, oh shit, like I'm going to be in here for a while. How am I going to survive this? And I landed in like some dark, scary place, and I'm trying to scream for my mom in the next room. And I'm screaming, I'm screaming, I'm screaming. And then all of a sudden, like, I got sucked back out and I was awake and I just ran to her room. It was so scary. And I had to force myself to stay awake for the rest of the night. And I was so groggy from the medication. Oh man, that was a bad night. It was such a bad night. Oh, and I was so sick the next day. The next day, I went to go see my somatic therapist, and I was such a mess. My system was so traumatized. I literally threw up on her table, and she was doing something that was like helping me calm, but I was like almost falling asleep, and just like the images and the I don't even know what it was, but what I was experiencing were just like these memories and images and all of these things like flooding into my mind. And it was like so scary and so awful. And thank God I had another angel. So I haven't mentioned her yet, but this is just like another divine thing that happened. I had another support that was really pivotal in just helping me get through this. And this is a woman that I actually went to high school with. And I hadn't seen her in years. We weren't particularly close in high school. And I'm now staying at my parents' place because they had to pack my house up for me. I was so incapacitated, I basically laid on the grass in the backyard while they did it. I couldn't function. But yeah, so I'm back in, I wouldn't say it's not exactly my hometown, but where I went to high school and things. And she was still there. And I was on Instagram and I saw a post, and she's a healer, and her post was addressing nervous system dysregulation caused by plant medicine and like the quickening of the planet, and it just resonated so deeply. And I was like, oh my God. I reached out to her and she said, yeah, of course. I'd love to see you. And she does a body nervous system healing technique called spinal flow. And really fascinating work. And what was so special about this relationship was like she just she wasn't scared of me, right? And the same with my somatic therapist. Like I was coming in like with really scary shit. And it was just like, you're gonna be fine. And she really was one person that showed up for me. She would drop by my parents' house and bring me bath salts and sweet things. I stayed the night at her house she even drove me to Kelowna to go get some stuff from my house before I moved. And yeah, so I had her to talk through things with, which was helpful. And I wasn't myself, right? Because I was in such a state. I was just like anxious and self-doubting and asking all these questions. And oh my God, so bless these people who dealt with me during this time, my freaking parents included. Oh my God. And that was such a huge thing too. As horrible as this whole experience was, and I'm sure I terrified the shit out of them. It's funny. We talk about how our generation is so traumatized because of our parents and blah, 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 blah. And yes, like there is stuff. But this was also like an opportunity for healing because I was back in my family home with my mom and dad taking care of me the best that they could. And they saved my life. Yeah, if it wasn't for them. My dad shows love in his way, and for him that was providing everything that I needed. If I decided I did all these crazy fucking diets. I tried carnivore. I needed these fancy smoothies, anything that I asked for, he went out and got it for me. And my mom was just like always there. And it's interesting because my mom's a psych nurse. Right? And she's just, even she's, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what's going on. What do you mean nervous system? What does that even mean? She's like, you have brain damage or something. And this is why, again, like this information is really important. And because a lot of the medical community doesn't understand this. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of misunderstanding around the nervous system. Yeah. Okay. So I talked about trying some medication. I also felt like a lot of guilt and stuff. I do remember like my health practitioner that I was working with was reaching out every once in a while, and I mentioned I just need some relief and I'm considering taking pharmaceuticals, and it was just kind of like you're at a crossroads. And so I feel like that just created a lot more, it just created resistance towards moving or for against moving towards something that I ultimately needed to do, but just created, yeah, more fear around. I at one point went to a different town to meet a man around, he works with PTSD vets. This was actually a really beautiful experience. And he's this really wonderful speaker. He focuses on heart math, which is really fascinating. And he hooked me up to some wires and we did some breathing and stuff. And yeah, I was hoping it was just going to miraculously fix me, which it didn't. It made me worse in a sense. After that, I got really bad tinnitus. And I was just like, cool, let's add another thing to the list. This is great. But it was a really beautiful experience because I went to see this man and I just really showed him my heart. I was in such a vulnerable state that I was going to do anything to heal. And it's interesting because one of the things that we do to tone the vagus nerve is like toning, right? And something I've always been really self-conscious of is my voice and singing in particular. So I've always been quite musically inclined. I played the piano for many years as a child and was always in like choir, and I've actually had quite a bit of formal training in singing, but always in a group setting. And I don't remember how it came up, but he asked, I started singing during my session. And when I woke up, or not when I woke up, but when I opened my eyes, he was crying. And he's, oh my goodness, that was so beautiful. Because I think he could also feel it like coming through, like the pain. And even with like my weak voice, it still really moved him. And so I shared that with my mom on the drive home. And I was like, okay, like maybe this will be part of my healing. And so I sang songs for her on the drive home in a way that I never had before. And she cried, and it was just like a whole thing. But there was, yeah, like some bonding and some sharing of deep things in those moments, which was really beautiful. Although it was very painful. Yeah. I also desperately wanted to go to LA and spend all of my savings on some doctor who I thought was going to be able to save me. Oh my God. Yeah, there's this dude who I follow and he does great work, but I connected with a woman who had very similar symptoms to mine after a vaccine injury, after she got the COVID jab and had a whole bunch of nervous system stuff. And this is a very real thing that has happened to people, right? One of the biggest things that I have learned through this experience, and I've spoken about this before, but now I truly understand it. Every body is different, and we hold so many different experiences in our vessels that pushing a one-size-fits-all approach of medicine onto people is going to cause a large amount of chaos. And we know that that's something that has happened over the past 5 years. And people are still dealing with the consequences of that. I was so angry because when I discovered what had happened to me, because I had opted out from taking that vaccine, and I was just like, as if I got this fucking shit when I didn't take it. And I think, and I truly believe that this would have happened to me earlier if I had taken that intervention because and it was just my soul screaming at me like, no, 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 no. Or not yet anyway, right? Because the conditions in my system, I was already on the brink. My nervous system was already holding so much. And when you introduce stuff to the body, whether it could be a medicine, it could be even an illness, like having COVID itself, right? Like people with long COVID. Some people I've heard just even dieting too hard can trigger like a really serious situation with the nervous system. So yeah, there's a lot of important considerations here. But yeah, this guy, I don't know. He's probably super legit, and I was just so fucking desperate. But I had called their office and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I don't know how we're gonna get there. This is gonna save me. And my mom was just like, no, no, you're not doing this. And I'm like, oh my God, what are the other options? And as time wore on, like I started getting really depressed. Well, not depressed, but for the most part of it, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna get through this. Like this is gonna be fine. I tolerated and managed an unfathomable amount of discomfort for a very long time. And it really started to wear on me. Like by February, March, I was just like, okay, there's always suicide. We never want to go to that place, but I'm just like, fuck, I'm broken beyond repair. Nobody knows what this is. I've contacted naturopaths and other people, and I tell them my symptoms, and they're just like, what? Like, people sounded scared. And yeah, so I'm like, if I got to, like, I'm only going to be able to tolerate this for so long. I'll just take a bottle of pills, right? Yeah. And I just kept losing more and more weight. I couldn't eat. And I'm like, I can only do this for so long. I finally decided to go to the hospital and try to talk to a psychiatrist because we were trying to try drugs at home, like some SSRIs, and like it was just too slow, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I had a psych consult with this woman, psychiatrist in Kamloops at the hospital, and at first I thought, okay, because she was very holistic minded. And she was just like, oh, what's going to fix you is ketamine. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, ketamine. It's just going to heal the brain. And it's amazing. And she mentioned that there was a program that I could do at the hospital, but there were also private programs. And so in my absolutely fucked up state, I'm like calling around to people that I know that are in the business and getting details on it. And it's just seeming like a wall. And also like in my body, I was just like, no, like this will definitely catapult me into psychosis. Like I already feel fucked up all the time. Getting more fucked up on top of it, like I can't imagine that being the solution. What I need is a balm for my central nervous system. And this is what I would imagine. I'd spent like every night to get to sleep, I would do like meditations and like these thematic practices over and over and over. And I would just imagine like honey, like a balm, calming my nervous system, calming my nervous system. And I'd get like minute amount of relief and then like I'll come back. But I knew that's what I needed. Oh, the ketamine psychiatrist. Okay. So yeah, she's okay. Either you figure out the ketamine thing, or I'm prescribing you Lyrica. And Lyrica is a drug. I looked this shit up, and it's, my God, it has the most lawsuits against it. The horror stories of this drug, I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this, no, I absolutely cannot go on this. So every direction that I tried to go in to heal was just like hitting a wall, hitting a wall, hitting a wall. It just felt no, 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 no. It was just so frustrating. And around this time, I was really feeling drawn and getting comfort around not connecting, but just seeing other people's stories of going through very difficult adversity. And so I'm going to tell a quick little story about something that's going to be very relevant later in the series or after the series. I'll be introducing you to this person who is now a very big part of my life. This is an individual that I was meant to be introduced to before I had gotten sick, and it just didn't happen. I'm at my wit's end at this point. I'm scrolling Instagram, which I was doing very minimally at this time because it just caused me so much pain to see people living their lives and me feeling like I had lost everything. Yeah, that was really, really hard. I had to put the spider down. There you go, Lupe. There you go. Yeah, that was a really, really difficult thing to witness, was watching people go on vacation and live their lives and do all these things, and like I couldn't do any of that. And I carried so much humiliation. I was absolutely humiliated. Yeah, that was a really big one. And I remember just saying, this isn't me. This isn't me. This is not what I do. This is not how I act. This is not me. I don't know where I am, but this is not me. Yeah, I was just a fraction of who I was before at that time. And I see this image of somebody, or of this person, pop up, and it's an image that he describes that he wasn't sure he was going to share or not. And it's an image of him cut with stitches from basically sternum to, I don't know, the bottom of his gut. And real thin, like skeleton thin. And he talks a little bit about his journey. And for the first time, I reached out. Like, we'd been following each other on Instagram for a while, but had never really interacted. And I just said, hey, dude, like, I see this, and I'm going through something really hard too. And I appreciate you posting it because it just helps a little bit. And I told him a little bit about this happening after plant medicine. And he just said something like, oh, yeah, like I did a plant medicine journey once too and was never the same after. And I thought, interesting. And that was it. He'll come back into the picture later in a really big way. Now, the moment that I realized that I was going to go to the hospital, it was interesting. I had gone to the dog park with my mom, and we were like walking slowly, these little laps. And I had been thinking about it. And again, my mom's a psych nurse. She doesn't work in the hospital, but she didn't want me to go. I'm just so scared, because we had had the conversation. She's, I'm just so scared that it's going to fuck you up even worse. But I had done a little bit of research, and I discovered that they had built a whole new psychiatric wing. And so I thought maybe it won't be too bad. We had gone down the first rabbit hole of getting that first psych consult. All of that scared the shit out of me. But I was like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to do this, because I don't know what else to do. So I was gonna go and do this fucking ketamine infusion thing. It's like a 7-day thing. And when yeah, I remember walking around with her at the dog park, and it's almost like I made a decision, and I almost wanted to tell her right then that, hey, I'm gonna admit myself into the hospital. And it just felt like there was like a little bit of relief, as much relief as my system could really compute. But there was like a sense of peace. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And so eventually I told her, and it was like, okay, we're going to do this. And it was really big and it was really scary. So we go, and just assuming they're going to just admit me, the doctor comes, like the ER attendant comes in, and he's just, we called the psychiatrist that you chatted with, and she's not going to admit you. I was like, what do you mean? She's just says that she told you what she prescribed and that's it. And I'm like, the ketamine thing that she had suggested was supposed to be at the hospital. And he's like, we have no idea what you're talking about. And I could go on about our healthcare system here. We know how fucking bad it is in Canada. But it was mind blowing. And at this point, both my mom and I are like hysterical. And we're just like, are you fucking kidding us? And I just knew that if I threatened to kill myself, they'd have to let me in. So I told him, I was like, if you don't admit me, I will go home and kill myself. And he does like this, like he knows what I'm doing. But legit, like I had been thinking about it, right? Because I'm like, if I don't know what else I'm gonna do. If I don't get help, like I don't know what else to do. So he came back and he's okay. I called her and she said that you can stay the night and in the morning you can have a consult with a different psychiatrist. And I was like, okay. So I was in like this shitty bed in a merge all night, waiting for this consult, and had this totally different woman the next morning, this German psychiatrist. And she takes one look at me and I tell her everything. She's, of course I'll admit you. And she's, oh my God, and you're on the wrong medication and da 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 da, and you're gonna be fine. And I was just like, oh my God. It felt like a miracle. It still took another day or so before they were able to bring me upstairs. And oh my God, I was so scared. So fucking brutal. But ultimately, this was the best decision that I had really ever made. Now we're getting into the psych ward chapter. You guys ready for this? There's some characters. There's some fucking characters in the psych ward. I did not belong in there. I did because I needed to go, but I wasn't crazy. And that's the difference. I think it's really important that we distinguish the difference between mental health and nervous system health. For me, mental health, and we can talk about anxiety and depression as being looped in with mental health, but that is actually a nervous system disorder. Mental health, for me, that's schizophrenia, bipolar, personality disorder. You act fucking weird because shit's going weird in your brain. What I was experiencing when you're on the anxiety or depression spectrum, chronic pain, those types of things, that's a nervous system thing. That's totally different. And to be honest, like the medical community doesn't really know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to those things. And it was not evident. The psychiatrist that I ended up with in the psych ward, he was very understanding, very busy guy, but he treated me like a human being, which was very refreshing, especially for being where I was. But they could just tell that I was normal, right? They're like, okay, she's clearly not crazy. Like she's going through some really gnarly shit. But I had a lot of quote unquote privileges. So I was able to leave. Like I would go home all the time and like garden with my mom and stuff. I ended up getting on some benzodiazepines, Ativan. And to be honest, that's the thing that saved my life. As much as I hate to admit that, I was really hoping it was going to be some amazing romantic thing and that somatic therapy was going to save me and da 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 da. But no, it was hardcore anti-anxiety medication. Benzodiazepines work on the central nervous system, and that balm that I had been begging for, that's essentially what it is. And I had an inkling that this is what I needed because I haven't told this part of the story yet. This is fucking wild. But another kind of like angel moment was when I reached out to my landlord. So I was renting my home in Kelowna, and really awesome family woman. I connected with her and I said, "Hey, I'm going through some stuff. I feel like it's like my nervous system." I didn't really go too much into it. And I said, "Can you give me like a couple of months?" And she was like, "I'm so sorry, but we can't because we're just not in that position." But she said, "I want you to know that I went through something similar and you will get through this and you will be stronger." And I was like, "What?" Can you imagine hearing that from your landlord? And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she didn't go too much in it, but I asked her, I was like, "What did you do to heal? Like what helped?" And she sent me a message later and explained that she would pace the field drinking a boost. And she would read a page of the Bible every day. It was the only thing that she could do. She's quite a religious woman. And she ended up on slow release lorazepam, which is basically Ativan, for 2 years. And I was like, whoa, okay, she did this and she got out of it. And there was just something I just knew. I was like, I need something to calm my nervous system. I need something to calm my nervous system. And me being a 1-3 in human design, I'm the research and experimenting person, right? But I'm like, I love R&D and love creating products, which we're going to get into later in the podcast, how all of this fits together. Yeah. I don't know. It pointed me in a direction. I also forgot to mention that the one woman that I went to high school with who was supporting me with her healing modalities, she had gone through a similar experience as well. So at this point, I had now personally known my landlord, this woman. There was someone that my mom worked with who went through something very similar as well. And so I'm going like, holy fuck, like, how often is this happening to people? If I personally know 3, and then there's another one that comes into the picture later here, but I'm just like, what? How do people not know about this? Like, how does the psychiatrist not know about this? It was all very odd. So my time in the psych ward was brutal. I was in there for an entire month. I did have my own room, my own bathroom, but I was also not allowed to have cords. So I couldn't dry my hair. I couldn't have a hair dryer in case I tried to kill myself. Every day I was just like, how am I here? My first day was so hard. Oh my God. I just crawled out of my room, sat in the cafeteria, looked at all the crazy people and cried. Thankfully, there was an outdoor balcony. It's actually a nice space. Like, it's way high up in the hospital. Beautiful view. Like, I had a huge window. Sun came in. Oh my God. Thank God I had some access to the elements. The outside area where you could hang out, there was just like some fake astroturf, but there was a bit of a garden. It was April. I was admitted, literally today is April 17th that I am recording this. I was admitted a year and 2 months ago. Yeah. Ish. Plants and stuff weren't really coming up yet, but there was dirt. And I would go out in the mornings and I would put my feet in the dirt. And that was grounding for me. Any sort of connection that I could have to nature. There were a couple of like shitty little plants and I would go out and just like connect with them. Oh my goodness. And the characters. My God. Okay. So this one story. This is just so wild. So there was like a communal room and where people could watch movies and stuff. I spent a lot of time in my room by myself, but I would come out every once in a while, depending on who the residents/inmates, whatever the fuck we're called, were at the time. Some people I was like chill with, some people would come in and they would freak me out and like I wouldn't want to be anywhere around them. But this was like an okay time. So I was watching whatever the fuck was on the TV. And this short young man, I don't know, he had to be like 20. I don't know. He had come from, so there's like the ward that I was in where like people are like not super crazy. And then there's another one where like people are like really fucked up, like where they have to tie you up and shit and you hear like screaming. So he had come out of there. Guess he got stable enough to come into the one that we were in. And he's like this little dude and he's covered in tattoos. He walks, he's like a gangster, talks like he's a gangster, face tattoos, whatever. And he's sitting next to me and I noticed that he's crying. And I just looked at him and I said, "It's okay to cry." And he looked at me and he was just like, yeah, because like trauma and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like it's okay. It's okay for guys to cry. And yeah, he divulged some information about, oh, his dad had passed. And he loved his dad because they used to run guns together. Yeah. So it's like, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. And I guess that small act of kindness towards him just triggered something in his brain. And I guess I became a object of affection after. So here I am in the psych ward. Not my best self. Not my best self. And I now have a child half my age who is bringing me gifts. He's bringing like candy bars and whatever. And he's kind of following me around and whatever. We would go for a walk outside. There was another person that I would talk to sometimes. And he's, "Can I come with you guys?" And we're like, okay. And on his last day, I just thought it was him being kind at that point. There was one day though, and like I was having a rough day. Like I was having a lot of breakdowns, like daily breakdowns. I'm in the psych ward. Like this is not cool. I am not okay. Things are not going well for me. I'm having a rough time. Was probably crying. I don't know. This guy, he just doesn't even notice. Walks up to me and he said, "Hey, you and me, when we get out of here, let's go for coffee." And I just look at him like, fucking for real right now? Is this actually happening? Like, how is this my life? How is this my life? His last day, because I stayed in there the longest out of everybody. I didn't want to go home because I'm like, I'm not better yet. I'm not leaving. His last day, I get a note handed to me by another patient with his phone number on it. He passed it to me like we were in fucking high school. And I was just like, it's going to make a great story. It's going to make a great story for the podcast. Oh my God. What? Yeah, there was him. And then there was like Rockin' Rhonda. Holy smokes, this woman, I don't know what the fuck. She was mentally ill for sure. She was just, she would shuffle around and just drink coffee. Just drink black coffee. We weren't allowed to have caffeine, so there was only like decaf. That's all she did. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't shower. She called herself Rockin' Rhonda. And she made the nurses' lives living hell. She would just like walk around and be like, "This place sucks dick." Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. She was there obviously involuntarily because she was in a state that needed constant supervision. But yeah, like I look back on it now, but fuck, she was creepy, man. Oh my God. When you're sick and you're going through like emotional stuff or like nervous system stuff, like sometimes the last thing you need is to be around people like that, but whatever. I can look back on it now and laugh. There was also another kid. Oh my God, this story was so funny. I felt so bad for him though. He was like a young man. I think he was going to the university. I was sitting outside getting sun. He came out and just started telling me this crazy story. He looked completely normal, was like a sporty, jockey, handsome young man. And he just went through a week of holy shit. I guess he was in Spain on like spring break or something. And he was with a couple of girls and they gave him a joint and it must have been laced with something. He said he only took a couple of tokes and he was like eating chapstick. He went into a complete psychosis. He was running all over Spain, like just chugging bottles of liquor. He thought angels were talking to him. He thought he was getting sucked into his phone. Like, just crazy psychosis shit. Calls his parents at some point. They're like, you need to get the fuck home. Took him like 3 days to get back into Canada. He's not sure if it was like a real angel or like an actual human being that helped him in the airport or the Calgary airport. I think his parents actually had to come and fetch him because he was just being so weird and freaking people out. And he thinks it's like this angel that like called them. I don't know. It was so whack. So like he was like back to earth at this point and just thinking it was funny. But he didn't think it was so funny a few days later when he went home a lot later than he thought he was going to. And he looked very upset. I think they had him on a lot of antipsychotics. So yeah, the things you see in the psych ward, poor kid. But like how crazy. And this is a thing too that I noticed in some of these groups that I had joined. A lot of people, they did MDMA once and it fucked up their nervous system. Smoked a joint, fucked up their nervous system. And it can be called, in some groups, they'll call it like an anxiety loop. And they explain it as this being like the most extreme form of anxiety that you can get. To me, I didn't identify with that because that's not what it felt like to me. There was overwhelm and all of that, but there was so much more going on there. A really important thing that happened for me when I was in the hospital, because I was so terrified of taking the drugs, but I knew I had to take the drugs. There was one guy that I connected with, and he runs a group around chronic fatigue syndrome and works with people with a lot of similar symptoms. I had my first call with him when I was in the psych ward. And he was like, yeah, so I don't talk about this in like my journey, but like I was also in the psych ward. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he was telling me about how he was diagnosed and how he was supported. And it was with medication. And it was the same stuff that they were giving me. And that actually really helped. And I considered joining his group, but I had really great support from a naturopathic doctor that I finally found, who was suggested to me by a friend. And again, this was like another kind of like divine moment. And it's crazy because she's going to be on the podcast and weaved into this in such a serendipitous way. You guys are going to be like, how is your life like this? It's really fucking bizarre. But she's amazing. She's nervous system specialized. So she's a nervous system specialized naturopath. I needed to have somebody on my team that wasn't completely allopathic, right? That's just not who I am. I'm all for functional now, which I always have been, but I wanted that other lens. And she was so good. I didn't know that she specialized in like how fucked up I was, but she does. And my very first call with her was a Zoom call with me sitting on my psych ward bed, sobbing hysterically. And the first thing she said to me was, "You don't scare me." And that was so huge. And she's, okay, I know this is terrible. This is just going to be a crazy chapter in your book. And you're not going to get out of this without medication. And you're going to be okay. And I was just like, holy shit. Okay. That is like wildly helpful. I still work with her to this day. I'm not completely off of this medication. I'm off of the vast majority of it. And we're doing some really, really cool stuff moving forward, integrating some plant medicines that I'm just going to leave that for a later date. It's all going to come together, you guys. Stay with me. I'm definitely rambling in this one. But yeah, she was just such a wonderful support. I didn't want to leave the psych ward because I didn't feel like I had gotten any better. I was definitely getting moments of peace with some of this medication that I was on. I was afraid that they weren't going to let me have it when I left. Thankfully, they did. And when I got home, it was so weird. It was like it just hit me, and I was like, wait, I am better. I am going to be okay. And immediately I launched into driving, going to see a friend. Like these were things that were absolutely inconceivable to me previously. And I was still having full on mentee V's in the hospital because I was just like, this isn't working. Like I still have all these symptoms. Like, how is this possible? I've been here for a fucking month. But there was like, I I remember the first day. Oh my God, I actually felt joy. Oh my God, I was like in the forest. I went for a walk and I felt joy for the first time in 7 months. Oh my God, the relief. I skipped a little bit. My body hadn't expressed any sort of joy or happiness or relief or anything in so long. And it felt so good. It felt so good to be in nature and be able to enjoy it. Because I was like prior to going to the hospital, I was forcing myself and trying to get out, and I was climbing fucking mountains because they said face your fears and whatever. It was just so hard though. I would just have these breakdowns. And finally, like just little cracks of light started coming into my life. And oh man, yeah, I was like, okay, I can do this. This is going to happen. Like, I can see a path to healing. This is so good. And around this time, I started getting my creativity back. So this was a thing that I forgot to mention, so I need to loop back. For those that don't know me, creativity is my life. I have been a designer for, I don't know, 16, 17 years, something like that. I've always been very creative ever since I was a kid. And I need to create shit to live. Like, that is my life force. And that was all gone when I was sick. I tried to draw, and it was just torture. When I was in the psych ward, my sister came down to visit. And she bought me a paint by numbers kit. Because that's exactly what you would imagine somebody in the fucking psych ward to be doing. She's like, here you go. And I'm like, okay, cool. I actually loved it. I would do my little paint by numbers in my room. And it's not very creative, but it's something that like I could focus on. And even though like my fucking hands were shaking and shit, like it was helpful. And ended up actually I don't have one here. I'll take a picture of one or put it on Instagram or something. But like the first one I did turned out really nice. And I was like, this is cool. And it just, yeah, it gave me something to, I don't know, kill time while I was in there. And then I finished one because I had nothing else to do, right? So I could do them fairly quickly. Ordered a couple more. And I was like, okay, this is going to be my thing for a while. I'm going to do paint by number. But a few weeks after getting out of the hospital, my creativity started coming back. And it started with small things. Like my parents opened up the cabin, and so I went to stay out there and had so much nature time, which was so needed. And I was able to start foraging. I didn't know what or why or what I was going to do with anything, but I could see beauty again and appreciate it. And so I started making little videos, and I made a few little videos that I put on Instagram, and everything was in slow-mo. And that was like the beginning of like my creativity opening up again. And then I started painting shells. When I say this, it sounds so silly. But I was like, they were actually really beautiful, and I'm still selling them. I have some left. But I was finding shells and decoupaging them and painting them, and they were really pretty, and they gave me joy. And then I turned them into incense vessels, and then I started wildcrafting and learning how to make incense. And then I started infusing botanicals into salts and making bath bombs. And then it was just like this huge torrent of creativity, just like the floodgates opened. And I was just like, I must create. And I was just like creating. I also started thrifting a lot at this time. This is not something that I ever did before, really, but I really got into it and was finding cool stuff. And I was chatting with my sister, and she had mentioned that she was wanting to purchase an RV. I was like, get one and I'll renovate it. My goal was to get up to my sister's place. So my sister has a farm in northern BC in a town that I was actually born in and lived here till I was like around 10. So this is actually my hometown and where I am still currently residing. It's a place that I never thought that I would ever fucking be in ever again. But yeah, here we are. And so that was the goal, right? Like, how can I do that 12-hour drive and get there, right? Like, when I had just started driving again. But I just felt like getting there and being around the animals and being in a small town was really going to support my journey. So yeah, I started collecting things for her, and it was crazy. Like, still no work was coming in. The nature of my business, my design business, I've never looked for design work. It's just always come to me. And it's so strange that during this entire period, it just stopped. It's almost like my higher self or my guides or whatever were just like, not right now. I did take on one project prior to going into the hospital. It almost fucking killed me. It was, oh my God. I don't even know how I did it. I don't know. It was wild. Yeah. So now we're at the point of the story where I'm slowly coming back into life and reintegrating with nature, feeling some creativity again. And I think I'm going to leave it there for now. There's something really sacred that happens when you start to connect with the wild again. And it doesn't scream, it like whispers. And those whispers were leading me north. So next time, I'm going to share what happened when I followed those whispers, how I met the current love of my life, and finally started remembering who I really am. I'll see you on the next episode. If this episode cracked you open, good. Share it far and wide so we can reach more people who are done pretending and ready to come home to themselves. To dive deeper into my world, explore wildcrafted apothecary and sacred art at magicmaven.com. Discover new tools for nervous system healing at mindfulmeds.io and Alchemy. Or bring your vision to life with me at the Brand Bruja. All the links and more are waiting for you in the show notes. Until next time, stay wild, stay rooted, and remember, you were made for this.